22. The Calm Before the Storm. By Nathan Hine. Chapter 1. Henry, where are you? Missy thought as she stared at the empty chair across from her, the words looping in her mind like a broken record. She sat alone at a table in La Rêve, the upscale French restaurant tucked between the glass towers of downtown. The crystal chandelier threw a soft amber glow over the white linen table, and the low murmur of other diners felt like a distant tide. She had slipped into a navy satin dress, its hem brushing the polished floor as she shifted impatiently in her seat for the occasion. A single candle flickered between the place settings, the flame trembling as if it sensed the unease in the room. Her green eyes flickered over the empty seat opposite her. She had waited so long for this, for the man who had always been there for her. Henry and she had a history that stretched back for years, a tangled tapestry of late-night visits, shared experiences, and a relationship that had always hovered on the edge of something deeper. They had been intimate more times than she could count, but they had never, until tonight, tried a real date. The waiter had already come by multiple times, refilling her water glass and offering her another basket of warm, butter-glazed breadsticks. She thanked him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes each time. Missy took a bite, the dough melting on her tongue, but the taste did nothing to soothe the knot tightening in her stomach. Henry, her confidant, her lover, the man who had shared with her the darkest corners of their pasts. He had promised to meet her here, a real date, a first night out that wasn't tangled in the shadows of their previous encounters. He was late, and the minutes stretched like elastic, thin and unforgiving. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear and lifted her glass for a sip of water, the glass cold against her fingertips. A sudden, sharp chorus of sirens ripped through the quiet, a high-pitched wail that seemed to come from every direction at once. Missy's eyes darted to the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the bustling street outside. A convoy of black vehicles, their paint matte and unreflective, surged forward and slammed to a stop in front of the restaurant. The lights on the cars flashed red and blue, but there were no police markings and no uniforms. A group of unidentifiable people in black suits stepped out. Something felt wrong about these people, like they were only the cold, uniformed black occupants of people, but not real. They were just the impression of a shadow moving with purpose. Their movements were synchronized, their shoulders squared, their shoes making no sound on the pavement. Missy felt a cold prickle crawl up her spine as she watched the agents approach the entrance. The doors of the restaurant burst open, and the figures in the suits stepped inside. One of them presented a badge to the hostess. The hostess, pale and trembling, looked at it without a word and gestured toward the table where Missy sat. Missy's gaze snapped to the empty seat across from her. The agents turned their heads, if they could even be called heads, toward her. Their faces were not faces. Where one would expect eyes, a nose, and a mouth, there was only a blur, a smudge of darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. It looked as if they were wearing masks, but there were no masks there at all. It was as if their humanity had simply been erased. Her instinct overrode any proper etiquette for a fancy restaurant. She rose, her chair scraping against the floor, and darted toward the kitchen door in the back of the restaurant. The suited agents turned their attention to the kitchen door she had run through not long before. Their movements were fluid, each step perfectly timed with the others, just as they had been entering the restaurant in the front. Missy's heart hammered like a drum. The kitchen was a maze of stainless steel counters, hanging pots, and sizzling pans. The staff shouted, "You can't be in here," but Missy didn't listen. She slipped behind the prep tables, ducking under a hanging pot rack, her pulse a staccato rhythm in her ears. The scent of garlic and sizzling oil filled her nostrils, but she barely noticed. She shoved the door open in the back of the kitchen and burst into the alley behind the restaurant, the night air slamming against her face. The alley was narrow, the brick walls damp from a recent rain. A single flickering bulb cast shadows that danced like specters. Missy's lungs burned as she ran, the blacktop uneven beneath her feet. The sound of her own footsteps was a frantic percussion. The black suit figures emerged from the restaurant's side entrance, their forms melting into the darkness with an uncanny swiftness. They were no longer separate beings. They coalesced into a single, undulating wave of black, moving as one entity toward her. Somewhere in the unnatural silence of the chase, she swore she could hear the faint thrum of their collective heartbeat. It was a low, resonant pulse that seemed to sync with the rhythm of her own. Every stride she took felt shorter, her legs heavier. The alley narrowed further, and the wave was now a wall of obsidian, rising a few feet above the ground, its surface rippling like dark water. Behind her, the blur faces surged forward, their movement uncanny, as if the air itself were being pushed. Missy could see the edges of the single-wave entity as it rolled, a black rippling surface that seemed to devour the streetlights and swallow the shadows. She glanced back despite herself, the instinct to know how close they were tightening around her. The wave was now only a few meters away, the world narrowing into a tunnel of black and the thundering roar of her own heart. She felt her muscles screaming for more speed, her lungs burning like furnace coal, but the black tide pressed in, relentless. The wave had a sharpness that was like teeth that were getting ready to snap shut on her. Missy's breath hitched, and a single, animalistic sound tore from her throat. It was a scream that was both a name and a plea. Chapter 2. Henry, where are you? Missy screamed out, her voice tearing through the silence of the room. Her eyes shot open, and she sprang upright, her chest heaving as she clutched the blanket tightly against her heart, hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. A cold sweat clung to her skin, making the fabric of her black nightgown stick to her body. She looked frantically around her in the bed, but the sheets were undisturbed except where she was. There was an empty, cooling spot where Henry should have been. Panic, sharp and familiar, clawed at her throat. She scanned the room, her gaze darting through the dim, crimson haze of the red lighting that bathed their sanctuary in the hue of blood that leaked from the shadows or hell itself. She looked around the room, frantically searching for the familiar silhouette of the man she had sacrificed so much to reclaim, but he was nowhere to be seen. She repeated his name a few more times, but not in a scream this time. Worry, sharp and visceral, passed through her very being as she did this. A terrifying doubt began to gnaw at her. Was everything she had endured, the dark ritual, the desperate journey to pull him back from the void, and the blood-soaked bargain that actually brought him back, was it all merely a fabrication of her mind? Was any of it real? Was this reality, or was she still trapped in a layered, deceptive dream? Another layer of a cruel nightmare? The uncertainty weighed on her, heavy and stifling. She couldn't tell if she was truly awake or if her mind was fractured, still dreaming in a world of familiar crimson. Just as the panic threatened to overcome her, the sound of the bathroom door opening echoed through the hallway, breaking the silence and drawing her attention. Moments later, the heavy thud of footsteps neared from the small hallway that led to the bathroom. Henry stepped into the room, and his brow was furrowed with concern as he walked towards the bed. His fiery red beard caught the dim red light, and his shoulder-length hair fell in messy waves against his broad shoulders. He was wearing nothing but a pair of sleeping shorts, his muscular physique on full display. Even now, she found herself in awe of him. The transformation that had accompanied his resurrection was something she still struggled to comprehend, but she wasn't complaining. Seeing him, the man who had been gone, the man she had pulled back from the void, brought a wave of such intense relief that she nearly wept. "Missy, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice low and concerned as he hurried to her side. His blue eyes, deep and piercing, searched hers for the source of her distress. She didn't answer with words at first. Instead, she reached out, her arms trembling as she held them up to him. "Hold me," she requested. "As you wish, madam," Henry replied gently. He climbed into the bed, and as his skin pressed against hers, he felt the violent shiver coursing through her frame. He pulled her flush against his chest. He pulled the blankets tight around them, his warmth acting as a shield against whatever had her so unsettled, and his hands rubbed her shoulders. "Wow, something's really got you upset. What is it?" Missy hesitated. She thought of the faceless, suited people who had chased her through the nightmare, but she couldn't bring herself to voice it. She didn't want to break the fragile peace of the moment. There was no reason to make a big deal out of a bad dream, because that's all it was. Just a bad dream. "It was just a bad dream," she answered, her voice cracking slightly. "I couldn't find you, and I thought I lost you again. It got me really scared." Henry tightened his embrace, his blue eyes searching hers with intense devotion. His fiery red beard brushed against her temple as he pulled her closer, his shoulder-length hair falling around them like a curtain. "Well," he murmured, his tone firm and reassuring. "I'm right here, and I'm not leaving you again. I love you." She shook her head, feeling the tears prick at the corners of her green eyes as she looked up at him. "I love you too." The silence of the room, once heavy with the weight of her nightmare, now felt thick with the unspoken tensions of their existence. She traced the lines of his broad shoulder, her green eyes reflect. "I want to go out," she said, pulling back slightly to look into those piercing blue eyes. "A real date. Somewhere with people, noise, and music. Somewhere that isn't here." Henry went still, his brow furrowed, a flicker of something guarded crossing his expression. "But we've been out together before." She shook her head, her dark hair fanning out against the pillows. She felt a surge of frustration, hot and sudden. "That's not what I mean. I don't want to be shadowed by all the others. Don't get me wrong. I love the guys and everything. But I just want it to be the two of us. You and me, no one else. Just a normal night." Henry's body tensed. He let out a long, heavy sigh, his gaze drifting towards the shadows in the corner of the room. I'll bring the idea up to the others," he said tentatively. "See if they can arrange for it for us." Missy pulled away from him, sitting up, her jaw tightening. The bitterness of their captivity flared. "We have to get permission to do everything," she snapped, her voice sharpening. "We brought you back, Henry. You're here now. When do we actually get to live our own lives?" Henry reached out, his large, muscular hand cupping her face, his thumb stroking her cheek with desperate tenderness. His eyes were wide, filled with a haunting, frantic honesty. "Missy, look at me. You know why they keep us close. It's not just about guarding us." "Then what is it?" "It's me," he admitted, his voice dropping to a gravelly, pained whisper. "I don't always feel like the man I used to be. Sometimes, when the hunger takes over or the residual rage from within tries to take over, I can't help myself. I lose my grip. I'm terrified of what I'd do if I were out there, alone without them. Alone with you. Look what I almost did to you on my first day back. I'm afraid I'd turn into the demon again, and this time I wouldn't be able to push it back down. That I'd end up slaughtering a bunch of innocent people like Cade did before. I can't risk that, and I certainly can't risk you being the one to witness it, or worse, the one to suffer for it." The anger drained out of Missy as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. She looked at his hands. These were the hands that brought her comfort and yet carried the potential for such terrible violence. She leant into his touch, her gaze softening. "I understand," she murmured, though the weight of his words felt like lead in her stomach. "We'll get out of here eventually, I promise." She settled back against him, allowing him to pull her into the safety of his embrace once more. She accepted his reasoning. She accepted the tether that bound them to the others, and she closed her eyes. As she did, the thought of truly being free, of being a woman with her man in a world that wasn't a nightmare, lingered in her mind. It was a ghost of a life she wasn't sure they would ever be allowed to touch. The two of them embraced with a lingering, desperate kiss before settling down together, holding each other as if the world might try to tear them apart the moment they let go.